They said no human pilot could handle the descent. The air shimmered with ion fire as the test range over Epsilon 3 flickered in crimson light. Rows of alien spectators filled the glass-vaulted hangar, their translucent skin pulsing with curiosity and disbelief. In the center stood a single human, Lieutenant Alex Rains, helmet tucked under his arm, a quiet smile on his face as though he'd already seen the outcome written in the stars. To them, he was reckless. To himself, he was simply alive. "Lieutenant, the numbers don't make sense," said Commander Vore, the TROC supervisor whose 6 eyes blinked in anxious sequence. "You're pushing a prototype suit beyond atmospheric threshold. The molecular plating will peel off before you breach the cloud layer." Alex's answer was simple. "Then I'll go faster than it can burn." The aliens exchanged glances, their neural ridges lighting in patterns of warning. In their language, faster than it can burn translated roughly to suicidal poetry. The Academy had seen hundreds attempt the gauntlet, the planet's upper atmosphere, a hellish cascade of molten vapor and crushing gravity. None had survived. The challenge existed now only as a ceremonial dare, a monument to hubris. Humans had been here less than a decade, and already one of them wanted to rewrite the legend. When Alex stepped toward the exoflight rig, the deck sensors tracked his pulse. It spiked not from fear but anticipation. Somewhere in that rhythm lay the human paradox, fragility wrapped around defiance. The technicians sealed the cockpit around him. A hiss, a tremor, then silence. His voice came through the intercom calm as still water. "Flight control, this is Rains. Initiating sequence on my mark." Inside the control room, Vore gestured with 2 claws. "All channels open. Begin telemetry recording. History requires evidence." Alex's fingers danced over the holographic controls, the pale blue light casting geometric reflections across his visor. He whispered under his breath, words meant for no one else. "You called me crazy. Let's find out if madness can fly." The launch rails hummed. The magnetic locks disengaged with a thunderous crack, and the craft shot downward toward the planet's molten clouds like a spear hurled by a god. Within seconds, friction ignited the atmosphere, wrapping the ship in orange flame. The sensors screamed overload. Every monitor inside the control tower went red. "Thermal signature exceeds tolerance," shouted a technician. "Abort!" Vore bellowed. "He'll disintegrate." But the human signal remained steady. Through static and roaring fire, his voice cut through, "Not yet." The cockpit shook violently. Alarms blared. The heat was so intense it warped time into slow motion. Alex's heartbeat merged with the engine rhythm. The flame outside no longer looked like destruction, it looked like possibility. He shifted his trajectory by instinct, aligning with invisible wind tunnels he'd studied for months. The other cadets had mocked him for analyzing chaos. Yet chaos, he knew, had a pattern if you listened long enough. "Angle to 32 degrees, he muttered. "Ride the shear, now." The ship lurched, suddenly stabilizing as if the planet itself accepted him. Data feeds in the tower jumped. Pressure dropped. Velocity held. A shocked murmur rippled through the aliens. "He's still alive," one gasped. "He's surfing the turbulence," another said, disbelief cracking their tone. In the roaring tunnel, Alex grinned. "Told you it was like an ocean." He remembered Earth, the Pacific waves that had thrown him off a board when he was 12, the feeling of spinning beneath the surface until he found calm in chaos. Space was no different, only louder. He guided the suit with microbursts, weaving between plasma currents, diving deeper where visibility became nothing but radiance. At 90 kilometers, the outer hull began to liquefy. The automated system begged for disengage. He disabled it with a single tap. "Computer," he said, "trust me." At 60 kilometers, the flames turned blue, a rare phenomenon caused by pressure inversion. It looked like he was flying through an ocean of fire. His breathing slowed. The sensors flattened into silence. For a moment, he thought he'd died, but then the turbulence eased, and he saw open sky beneath the clouds, glowing emerald against the planet's magnetic field. The impossible corridor. He laughed, a sharp, human laugh echoing through the calm. Flight control, you seeing this? Static answered, but he didn't need a reply. Below him, a narrow landing strip of basalt glimmered like a promise. The rest was instinct. He flipped the craft inverted, engaged the retro thrusters, and let gravity pull him home. The acceleration crushed his ribs, the noise became pure white. At the last second, he rolled upright and fired the landing jets. The ship struck the platform in a blaze of dust and molten rock, skidding to a halt just meters from the edge. Silence. Then, a soft ping, landing successful. Inside the control tower, no one spoke for several breaths. The TROC commander's gills fluttered. He landed it. Someone whispered, the human survived the gauntlet. Within seconds, the hangar exploded with noise. Broadcast relays across the orbital ring lit up. Aliens shouted, recorded, gestured in disbelief. The myth had been broken not by technology, but by will. Alex emerged from the cockpit, smoke trailing behind him, armor half melted, grin intact. His boots clicked on the charred metal as he looked up at the hovering drones capturing every angle. Well, he said, still think I'm crazy? Vor descended the ramp, eyes wide, voice trembling between anger and awe. You disobeyed 10 safety protocols. You destroyed a prototype worth 40 million credits. And you landed it, Alex finished. The commander paused, then gave the faintest nod. Yes. You landed it. The crowd outside chanted his name, an unfamiliar sound on this world. It echoed through the chamber until even the walls seemed to hum along. For the first time, the phrase human pilot meant something different. Alex removed his helmet, letting the heat escape in visible waves. He looked toward the viewing deck where cadets of every species pressed against the glass. Some were cheering. Others, silent, calculating. He could almost hear their thoughts, if the human can do it, what's our excuse? He didn't seek glory, he sought proof. Proof that fear was just an equation waiting for courage to solve it. Later, when reporters swarmed and scientists argued about impossible physics, Alex slipped away to the edge of the landing strip. The basalt was still warm under his gloves. Above him, the planet's rings cut across the sky like scars of light. He whispered again to himself, softer this time. They called me crazy. Guess crazy has its uses. That night, the Academy's upper deck glowed with silver floodlights. Broadcast drones hovered around the landing bay like curious insects, replaying the footage to billions across the Alliance network. Every angle of Alex's descent became legend, each flame, each shake, each insane calculation replayed in slow motion. And somewhere beneath the cheering, the silence of disbelief settled deeper than noise. For centuries, alien doctrine had insisted the gauntlet was suicide. Yet one human had turned suicide into precision. Alex leaned against the cooling hull, chest still tight, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. The scent of burned alloy and ozone filled the air. The medical drones buzzed around him, scanning for fractures. He waved them off. I'm fine, he said. He wasn't, but pain was proof he'd lived through the impossible. Commander Vor approached, the echo of claws tapping on metal. His tone carried no anger this time, only study. Humans, he said quietly, define courage differently than we do. Alex smirked. Maybe we just don't define it at all. Vor tilted his head, thoughtful. You broke every law of physics known to my kind. Do you know what they will do with this recording? Use it, Alex said. They'll teach it, dissect it, argue about it. And some kid out there, maybe not even human, will watch and think, if he did it, so can I. That's enough. The commander's secondary eyelids flickered. It was, in TROC culture, the equivalent of a smile. You may have just changed what fear means, Lieutenant. Alex shrugged. Fear's just the tax you pay for doing something worth remembering. Behind them, the first reports flooded the networks. Human pilot survives the gauntlet. Impossible flight confirmed. Alliance Science Division demands explanation. It spread like wildfire across systems that had long dismissed Earth's recruits as reckless dreamers. Now the narrative shifted. The newcomers had done the impossible, not by superior technology, but by nerve. Hours later, alone in his quarters, Alex watched the replay one more time. Without the adrenaline, it looked different, slower, more brutal. He saw how close he'd come to vaporizing. He saw the flames licking the cockpit glass, the warning lights screaming. He felt his throat tighten, realizing he hadn't been fearless, he just refused to let fear make the decision. He switched off the holo. The silence pressed in. Somewhere outside, ships hummed through docking cycles, and alien laughter echoed from the mess hall. For the first time, he wondered if the others would ever truly understand why he'd done it. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about defiance. It was about proof of concept, that humanity's instinct, to try, to fail, to try again, wasn't madness. It was method. A chime sounded. His door slid open. It was Cadet Ilnara, a Ledhari pilot trainee with crystalline eyes that caught light like water. She stood at attention, awkward but determined. "Lieutenant," she said, "they're saying what you did is impossible." He chuckled softly. "They're right. Then how did you survive?" He looked at her a long moment. "Because I didn't fly the math. I flew the feeling." She frowned. Feeling? Every species here was trained to eliminate instinct, to let the machine think. But a storm doesn't follow code. You have to feel when it wants to throw you and when it'll carry you. Once you trust that, the storm trusts you back. Ilnara nodded slowly, her facial crystals flickering in thought. "You make chaos sound alive." "Maybe it is," he said. And maybe it was waiting for someone stubborn enough to listen. By morning, new orders arrived. The council wanted to debrief him on Epsilon Prime. Transport awaited at dawn. Vor met him at the hangar once more, this time extending a ceremonial sigil, a mark of recognition. "Not a medal," the commander said. "A warning. From this day, they will expect the impossible from your kind." Alex fastened the sigil to his sleeve. Then they better get used to being surprised. As he boarded the shuttle, he glanced back at the academy, the same place where laughter had greeted his proposal, where they'd called him mad. Now, the launch bays were filled with cadets running simulations based on his data. Screens displayed the Rain's maneuver. What had once been madness was now curriculum. The shuttle detached, sliding through the bright rings of Epsilon. He watched the atmosphere below shimmer with stormlight. Somewhere down there, his burnt landing pad still glowed. He wondered how long before someone else tried it. He hoped they would. At the council debrief, a dozen alien scholars bombarded him with questions. Equations projected in the air, gravity models rotating, pressure graphs alive with color. "Your descent profile violates energy law," said one. "Your craft should have atomized," said another. "The sensors must be wrong." Alex listened, arms crossed, until the last one finished. "You're all missing something," he said quietly. "I didn't beat your laws. I bent them, just long enough to pass through." "How?" demanded the physicist. "By trusting the gap between equations. That's where possibility hides." They stared at him as though he'd spoken magic. Maybe he had. For all their intellect, none of them had gambled their life on instinct. None had seen that tiny moment when the universe stopped saying no and whispered maybe. When the meeting ended, an aide approached him, nervous. "Lieutenant, the council wishes to extend an invitation. They're forming a joint program, humans and Troc, to explore atmospheric flight on other death worlds." Alex smiled faintly. "Death worlds, huh? You know we call those training grounds back home." The aide blinked, unsure if it was humor. It was, and it wasn't. As Alex stepped back into the corridor, he saw his reflection in the viewport, tired eyes, soot marks on his jaw, the faint shimmer of the sigil on his uniform. Beyond the glass, alien ships moved like silver fish through dark water. The universe suddenly felt smaller, not because it had shrunk, but because one man's insanity had expanded what was possible. He thought again of the words that had followed him since childhood, "You're crazy." Maybe that was humanity's real gift to the stars, the courage to be called mad before history called it genius. He walked toward the light of the docking bay, the hum of engines rising. Somewhere a reporter shouted his name, somewhere else, a child watched the footage and whispered, "Someday I'll do that." And Alex, without hearing, smiled, as if answering across time. Because he already knew they would.